think there is enough information sharing out there that on the free market, the talent is going to go to the best available offer, other things being equal, if people are allowed to.
Do you feel that that's the way things have gone thus far in this country, that you just allow things to be and everything corrects itself and everything's fine and what's going to happen is going to happen?
Well, I mean, think about this. I mean, would you rather have it to centralized control by a government? I mean, most of our politicians in Washington right now are lining their own pockets at our expense. And it's all full of corruption and backroom deals and everything else. Why? Because they have total control over so many
corporations. They're exactly the same.
But corporations don't have the ability to force people, though. All corporations can do is spend money and hire and fire.
No, that's not true. The corporations
unless they work through government, unless they work through cronyism, right?
Corporations have a great deal of power over people's lives, especially when you've been working for a corporation for many, many years. You're high-powered or whatever. You make a lot of money, and you're maybe worked for them for 20 years, and now you're in your 50s or something like that, and you get fired, and it's really hard to find a job again. And that's how they control people. I mean, it's not true that corporations don't have power and control just the way the government does. They both do. And I'm certainly not someone who believes the government is all good and great. I mean, government is evil just the way corporations are evil. But to me, they're both evil. And they both have good sides as well. They have good and bad to both. I mean, nothing is one of them.
Well, I mean, the biggest thing is, government can just come and completely confiscate your money. There's been all sorts of stories about civil forfeiture of people's assets lately, right? That, you happen to be carrying $10,000 cash when, some police officer doesn't think you're supposed to, and they take it and you never see it again. I mean, only government can do that, right? The corporation can fire you or whatever and do something unjust, but I mean, people move from job to job now way more than they used to. The old model of somebody going to work, for a company and staying there for their entire career and then getting the gold watch at the end, that just doesn't happen nearly as much anymore.
Absolutely true. Yeah, absolutely true. But I don't think that the answer is to let people to depend on corporations to do quote unquote the right thing. Is just as ignorant as for me to rely on the government to do quote unquote the right thing in every situation. But so the question is, I guess, do you allow the government to control it? I guess what you're asking me, maybe. The government control the situation, or do you want the corporation or the people, as you say, to control the situation? I think the situation should be controlled equally to some degree. I think that you both have some sort of power in the situation and some sort of repercussions for their actions. So I think that's a balanced approach to having government and corporations is fair.
Well, I would disagree with it in the way that you're formulating it, because really what you're talking about is having some initiation of force by government against actors in the market, mainly, corporations, employers, and everything else. And I believe that there should not be any initiation of force, that government should be there only when there is an actual rights violation. So you might think a corporation is behaving unfairly in a certain way if, for example, it lets go someone who's in their 50s or something, right? But, why is a corporation letting somebody in their 50s go? That person's got so much experience and presumably would still be a very valuable member. So I think the loss would be theirs if they're doing this, right? So, I mean, there's people who behave irrationally and they should suffer for it. And that's it.
They cost a lot more to them than having two 20-year-olds fill their same shoes. Corporations are all about what? Money. That's the bottom line. That's why they're formed. They're about making money, making profit, nothing else. Yeah. That's the directive. And that's why they fire a 50-year-old.
But a good corporation would know that a 50-some-odd-year-old with all kinds of wisdom and experience is not going to be able to be replaced by the two 20-year-olds, as it were. It's not going to be the same.
That's not realistic. I'm sorry, but that's just an unrealistic view. The realistic view is, the truth is, that corporations do this all the time to people in that age bracket. Specifically, ageism is something that's very rampant, especially in corporations, and because of the reason I just gave you. So, I agree with you, of course, that getting rid of a 50-year-old for those reasons is stupid. And in the long term, the long range, and I'm sure that not every corporation does that, but there are many corporations that do that for the exact reason I gave you, because it's about profit motive.
Well, I think those ones are really going to suffer, and I would like to let the market decide these issues. And and again, it goes down to basically the imperative, and I think it is an imperative of allowing people to be free to act according to their own judgment. And I'm coming from the view of the philosopher Ayn Rand, where she has observed. Yeah, no wonder we disagree, right? No wonder we disagree. But, she observed that the way that we survive as human beings is by our reason, by our rational faculty. That is how, for instance, this whole Blog Talk Radio that we're talking over right now could be created. Somebody had to invent this, right? It's through our reason that we sustain our lives. And so she thinks that insofar as you prevent human reason from operating, then you are cutting off people's ability to sustain their lives. And the thing that you need for reason to operate is to be left free, no initiation of force. And that would be, not through government either. So if somebody violates rights, if somebody else initiates force, of course, government should step in and do something about it if there's fraud, force, etc. But if not, if somebody is just being an irrational actor in the market by, for instance, unjustly letting an employee go when they have the legal right to do so, no, you just let the market decide things like that. You let that person suffer.
People have often said, and I'm sure you probably agree with this, that just because something is legal doesn't make it right. And so I think,
of course,
we are talking about two different things here. What I'm driven by is, as I started to say at the beginning, what I'm driven by is equality, and I'm driven by what is right, what's fair, or whatever. And you're driven, what I'm hearing you say, and maybe I'm wrong, what you're primarily driven by is just let things be. As long as it's not something about equality or whatever you're saying, let's let it be what it's going to be, and the market will correct itself, blah, blah, blah. I don't agree with that.
What is your argument for equality? Why, for instance, because people are not born completely equal, for example. So why is it that government should try to make equal in terms of outcome or anything else?
No one starts off in this world on equal footing, if that's what you mean by being equal. Or do you mean inherently equal because of their human traits? What do you mean by equal exactly?
Well, people don't start out equal. People don't make choices that put them in positions that are equal, right? Some people make a lot of better choices than other people.
That has nothing to do with being equal inherently as a person, as a human being. Being a human being, being born in this world, this is how I see it, being born in this world, you're born equal, period. Whether you are born into equal circumstances or not is, of course, not true. One thing that our founding fathers brought to us, and we thank them for this weekend, was making us equal before the law. Of course, they made some mistakes in our founding, and not everybody was equal before the law for quite a while. But the basic principle of being equal before the law was in our founding documents, if not, perfectly applied. So equal before the law, sure, but being equal before the law and then being equal in terms of resources or compensation is a whole different thing. We are not born with equal talents or anything else. And how can the law, and how can it justly try to make up for this? And why should it? It means to me that what it's doing and how it can is essentially to just make everyone to have an equal opportunity. That's what it's about. Access to same opportunities, meaning whether or not someone takes advantage of them or not, it's up on that person. Whether someone has access to a college education or to business loans or whatever the case may be, to good credit or whatever it might be, if they have access to it and they can, obtain it, then fine. If they do, fine. If they don't, that's their own choice.
Meaning that government should impose force in order to create this equal access in some way, because somebody's got to pay for it, right?
Yeah, and I'm absolutely fine with that. And I'm a liberal, so I'm fine with government.
And this is at the basic root where we disagree. And really, what you're coming from, what I would call a Rawlsian perspective, right? Rawls would say, if we all decide from behind the veil of ignorance what we think the rules should be, then we all agree that you were not born deserving whatever advantages that you have, or your talents or your looks or anything else. You weren't born with that. And so therefore, we need to have some sort of redistributive mechanism in society to make up for the fact that some people were, through no accomplishment of their own, given the rich parents or the looks and the whatever, right? It's kind of right. that you didn't build that kind of thing, right?
That's not quite what I believe, but it's close.
Okay.
But that's not quite what I believe. Because I don't believe that, you're saying, I want to redistribute wealth or whatever, blah, 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 just so that everyone's equal. No, I still think that everyone is equal. I'm just saying that when I say people should be able to have access to these things and opportunities, the government doesn't necessarily have to spend money necessarily to do that. It doesn't have to be the government that does it. I'm talking generally about society as a whole, ensuring that we have equal rights legally. So the same access, for example, gays and lesbians have the same access to gay marriage and to be able to adopt in the same legal...
Right, but you were saying, for example, that the government should force employers to pay a couple different employees the same salary. Right. So you are talking about having government is going to be forcing people to act in certain ways against their will to achieve measures of equality.
Yes, and that's necessary. Just like it was in slavery and many other things in this country. Yes, absolutely. Because it's necessary, because human beings do not do the right thing. We only do the right thing when we were forced to do it. That's the truth.
Okay, but first of all, no one is behaving morally if they're behaving at the point of a gun. So you can't enforce morality anyway. But in terms of access and opportunities and equality,
the same. The net result is the same. The net result is the same because someone's being forced to hire black people in affirmative action or whatever, or allow them to go to certain colleges. Just because they're being forced to do it doesn't mean that the net result be different than whether they chose to do it on their own.
I mean, first of all, I don't know that any sort of affirmative action or any of this is actually even good for the recipient. It's doubtful whether it is. But the basic thing, and really what I'm going to have to do is have, leave you to maybe go read it even if you're interested. But there is an article by Rand, and it's available free online, and it's called The Objectivist Ethics. And in it, she defends this root idea of reason as our means of survival and the necessity of reason being left free to operate. That if you want human beings to live as human beings, as the type of beings that they are, they need to be free to act according to their own judgment. And insofar as you bring government in to force people to behave certain ways, what you're doing is you're undermining the operation of reason. And you might think you're doing it for good reasons, but really what you're doing is you're undermining the whole basic method of human survival in the process. And so it's a self-defeating sort of thing. That's really the perspective from where I come. So the idea of forcing people to, treat each other well, you're applying force, you're undermining our essence as a human being.
So all of the things that we as human beings, specifically in this country or in the world, I guess, but specifically in this country in America, that we've been forced to do by the government because human beings would not do it on their own, we should never have been forced to do in the first place. All the changes in legislation, the constitutional amendments, everything we've been forced to do by government, we should never have been forced to do it all.
Well, I mean, some of the things. So, for example, if we had enforced segregation, right? Enforced segregation is evil because that's government applying force. So, if you have the federal government coming to the state governments where the states had imposed segregation, and the federal government says, no, you cannot do that, this is all good. Whenever the government retaliates against those who initiate force, the government is behaving morally, right? But again, the core principle is that initiation of force should be no part of a human relationship. There should be no initiation of force.
But you've already said it, that it should never happen, and it's happened. You're saying in some cases it should happen, in other cases it shouldn't. So where's the line?
No, because there's retaliatory force and there's initiation. So it's the difference between self-defense and a robber, right? So if the robber comes to you with a gun, you're allowed to defend yourself. And I guess you're in Texas, so you're really allowed to defend yourself in Texas.
that's a moral question that you yourself are making a judgment on, just as if I